You think you got married for love, but in reality you were slowly trained to be grateful while you were being tamed. They called it partnership, but your every gesture was rewarded or punished like subtle training. Praise when you gave in, cold silence when you dared to disagree. That's not affection, it's conditioning, and you accepted it because you wanted to be good, because you wanted to be worthy. But no one warned you that the more worthy you became, the less freedom you would have. That the more you gave yourself, the less of you would be left. Take a good look at your routine. How many of your choices are really yours? How many of your silences were bought for peace? How many times have you said yes just because saying no would cost you the whole night? This is not marriage. It is a contract of renunciation, and the cruelest clause is the one you never consciously signed, the one that requires you to disappear little by little and smile while you disappear. But what lies behind all this is not just injustice. It is a system, a game where men serve until they break, where their exhaustion is normalized, their pain ridiculed, and their sacrifice romanticized. Modern marriage doesn't demand your love. It demands your usefulness, and when that ends, you end too. In this video, we're going to peel away this structure, layer by layer, until only one question remains. Who would you be if you hadn't adapted so much? And if you think this is just exaggeration, wait until you remember all the times you swallowed your truth so you wouldn't be called insensitive, all the times sex became a reward, affection became currency, and your autonomy became a threat. Welcome. But understand, this is not a video about the end of love. It's about the beginning of awareness. And once you see it clearly, you will never accept living in the dark again. Men don't realize that by sealing the commitment of marriage, they are voluntarily handing over the keys to their own prison. A prison without bars, without guards, but with vows of love and promises of eternity. And yet, as effective as any locked cell, I myself, in my wanderings and seductions, have learned to distrust the structure that promises stability at the cost of individuality. Marriage, for many men, is the beginning of a slow and silent dissolution of self. They enter out of passion, but stay out of habit, and that habit corrodes them. First, friends disappear. They are now considered bad influences or distractions from the family focus. Then hobbies are classified as immature, selfish, useless. Unless they serve the family, of course. Sundays that once belonged to pleasure become hostages to chores, shopping, and visits to places where silence is more desirable than company. Free time dies and no one mourns it. Next, money changes hands. What was once my job, my effort, my choice becomes ours, but with silent, unilateral management. Women often take control of finances on the grounds of practicality, when in fact what is taking place is a decentralization of personal power. But the most fascinating thing is that this transformation is not imposed by force. It is internalized. Men cooperate with their own domestication, convinced that they are doing the right thing. Marriage does not bind them. They bind themselves for fear of appearing selfish. I remember a French count I met in Venice. Young, rich, daring, and married for family convenience. His once vibrant eyes had become dull in less than 2 winters. "She demands nothing of me, Giacomo," he said once, "only that I become someone else." And he did. As respectable as he was unhappy. The subtle beauty of this system is that it transforms man's noble instinct to protect, provide, and love into a chain. What was virtue becomes guilt. What was freedom becomes duty. What was man becomes shadow. Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. I dare say that for a married man, the most terrifying thing would be to recognize how much he has ceased to be who he was. And when he dares to look in that mirror, it is already too late. He no longer remembers the sound of his own voice when he spoke only for himself. This is where the loss begins, and no one warns that it has no end. Because every concession that seems like love, every choice made for the sake of the relationship, is a layer of varnish on the real soul that is slowly being sealed under the name of maturity. There is a cruel trick at the heart of modern marriage, a trick so well crafted that men, even though they are its main victims, not only collaborate with it, they defend it, not out of weakness, but because they have been trained to believe that their value lies in silently sacrificing themselves. Loving, providing, enduring, always with a smile on their faces, always grateful for being needed. This is the most refined trap, when servitude comes wrapped in recognition, when being exploited is described as being valued. Ever since I learned to observe women, I realized that their strength has never been in brute force, but in their ability to shape worlds without raising their voices. The most effective trick is not to demand, it is to wait. And men, eager to be seen as good, fair, and reliable, mold themselves. They anticipate, they predict desires, correct their speech, erase parts of themselves before external censure even occurs. This is where the dangerous idea of happy her, happy everyone arises. A popular aphorism, repeated so often that no one questions its origin. But I ask, how many times have you heard happy him, happy home? That's right, the scales have never been balanced, and no one seems to care. Love in this structure becomes conditional. You will be loved if you maintain the standard, if you continue to be useful, if you never fail in your role. And the most perverse thing, you will be held responsible for any crisis, fatigue, or imbalance in the relationship. Because deep down, marriage is no longer a union, it is a logistical operation, and man is its engine. Schopenhauer, with his brutal clarity, stated, "Man is only free when he is alone." And this loneliness, which should be a space for reinvention, is treated as a threat. Men cannot allow themselves to stray, because any distance is interpreted as a lack of love, any independence as selfishness, any pause as a lack of commitment. The problem is not with women, it is with what the structure allows to become invisible. Love, which should be a daily choice, becomes a lifelong obligation. Passion, which should be a game of freedom, becomes a mechanism of surveillance. Affection, which should blossom spontaneously, becomes a system of rewards and punishments. And when that happens, marriage ceases to be a shelter and becomes a laboratory of emotional conditioning. I have known men of high standing, influential and powerful, who bowed like guilty boys before the mood swings of their wives. A Spanish duke once confessed to me between sips of wine, "She smiles, and I become a king. She is silent, and I become a servant," and he was grateful for that. He believed that this instability was proof of emotional depth. The programming was complete. The most insidious thing about marriage is not the abrupt loss, it is the imperceptible erosion. No one wakes up one day and realizes they are no longer free. The loss happens between the lines, in the silent choice not to disagree, in the withdrawal of an invitation, in the forgetting of one's own desire. Men start by giving in on small things. A night out with friends? Better cancel. Your favorite restaurant? Maybe another time a solo plan to breathe, too selfish. Each sacrifice seems reasonable. After all, love requires compromise. Isn't that what they say? But what no one says is that these compromises are never symmetrical. Men give in more, and when they give in, they disappear. I, who have been in beds and castles, clearly understand the exact point at which the lover becomes a husband, and the husband becomes a shadow. The difference is brutal. The lover provokes, desires, acts on impulse. The husband calculates, avoids, reacts to preserve peace. There is a biological logic behind this. During the game of conquest, women become experts at being charming. Easy smiles, abundant sex, common interests, genuine enthusiasm. It's as if she's saying, "Look who I can be for you." But after victory, and marriage is the crowning glory of that victory, everything changes direction. She no longer needs to offer. She begins to demand. Sex becomes currency. Attention, a tool of control. Empathy, a luxury that comes only when it is convenient. And passion, that becomes a memory used to justify what the present no longer delivers. A Venetian friend, a libertine like few others, fell into the trap. He married a woman who, during their courtship, was as light as a spring breeze. After the altar, she became the judge of his every move. When he came to me, he no longer spoke with a sparkle in his eyes. "She's still beautiful," he said, "but now I'm the one who's aging in silence. It's a pattern, not an accident. The woman who once cared about being desired now demands to be obeyed, and the man, who was once the protagonist of desire, has become an extra in his own script. His desires, dangerous. His decisions, potentially offensive. His freedom, a risk to family stability. Few admit it, many live it. The transformation happens silently, like rust on fine steel. And when men finally realize they are being corroded, there is nowhere to go back to. because all the places where they once existed have been converted into shared spaces, and their presence there has become a concession. That is the secret. Marriage, for many men, does not kill, it erases. And this erasure is sold as maturity, as if sacrificing oneself were the pinnacle of love. But it is not. It is the end of the man you used to be. There is a moment, always subtle, when a married man begins to ask himself, where am I in all this? It is not a question of ego, it is a question of identity, because what begins as a life project for two soon reveals itself to be a project of unilateral adaptation. His adaptation to her world. Demands increase, concessions become the rule, and the most perverse thing, women not only change their demands, they change their position in the contract. What was seduction becomes obligation. What was companionship becomes management. She no longer asks how you are, she asks what you did. Love becomes an audit. This is where what I call the dispensable effect comes in, when men are no longer seen as individuals and become functions, providers, problem solvers, emotional shields. If they fail, or just get tired, they receive no compassion. They receive demands, because the affection they receive is conditional on their performance. The statistics are merciless. More than 70% of divorce filings come from women, and contrary to romantic notions, it is not unhappiness that drives them. It is cold calculation. When the cost-benefit ratio of marriage is reversed, they leave, not out of cruelty, but out of a logic that was taught to them from an early age. Take care of yourself, always. Men, however, have been taught the opposite. Take care of everyone, even if you destroy yourself in the process. And so he supports the household, protects the children, swallows boredom and disrespect, all in the name of a love that no longer sees him, because a man who becomes predictable, stable, and too available is seen as invisible. I've seen it so many times that I've lost count. Well-meaning men who gave everything, only to find that it wasn't enough. A Viennese diplomat once confided in me, the more I gave, the more she distanced herself. In the end, I was punished for loving her as I promised. His pain was real, but his surprise was naive, because in a game that isn't explained, whoever loves more loses. The legal system, in turn, ensures that not even separation will restore a man's autonomy. He will continue to pay. For children he hardly sees, for a house he cannot enter, for a life from which he has been removed. Justice becomes an extension of emotional punishment, a monthly reminder that his value was merely functional. And the cruelest part, society applauds him as he sinks. The sacrificed man is celebrated, the awakened man is condemned. Anyone who dares to say no to the structure is branded immature, selfish, disloyal, because the system does not want conscious men, it wants useful men. But usefulness has an expiration date, and when it expires, love disappears, along with everything the man believed to be unconditional. What is left of a man when everything that made him unique has been diluted in concessions, when his routine revolves around pleasing, sustaining, and enduring, when he has become a good husband but has ceased to be a complete human being? What remains is a specter, a functional ghost, a body that moves but no longer pulses. The real problem was never love. It was the way love was domesticated, packaged, and sold as a unilateral responsibility. Disguised as maturity, marriage has become for many a field of conditioning, where silence is confused with peace, the absence of desire with fidelity, and renunciation with virtue. But constant renunciation is not noble. It is self-annihilation. The man who gives too much of himself loses his gaze, and without his gaze he loses his direction. There is no compass for those who live spinning around others. The price of this is not only emotional, it is existential. The question that remains when all is silent is, what is left of me inside? In my travels I discovered that the freest men were not the most loved. They were the ones who dared to love themselves enough not to beg for permanence. They were the ones who looked into the eyes of loneliness and said, I prefer emptiness to annihilation. They understood a truth that few accept. Marriage, as it is sold to us, is not about two halves walking together. It's about one whole and a manual of expectations, and if you don't write your own rules, you will live forever under someone else's. Now, if you've come this far, it's not by chance. There is a part of you that already senses what has been suffocating you, a part that longs not for rebellion but for reconquest. of yourself, your mind, your will. That part needs to be fed with courage, not guilt. So if this content sparks something in you, discomfort, recognition, the beginning of liberation, like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is more than a digital gesture. It's a sign that you're ready to get out of automatic mode. If you want to support this work with any amount, your contribution is more than welcome. It is the fuel for more men to awaken from this silent cycle of servitude. The support button is below. Use it as a declaration of independence. And if you are truly committed to your evolution, write in the comments indomitable consciousness, because that is what the world tries to erase, and that is what you are about to rebuild.